Go.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Arthur Aguette with Ultria, and I'm joined today, of course, by Tim Cummins, President of IACCM. And today's session will be on taking contract management beyond the edge of the enterprise. For those of you who have not heard us speak before, I'm one of the founders of Ultria. We've been in the contract management and information government space for some time, and we're certainly very excited to spend the next hour or so with everyone here. Tim Cummins, I think, is a man who needs almost no introduction, but Tim is the president of IACCM, the International Association of Contract Management. I think I'll let him probably talk a little bit more about his background as he sort of begins our session today. Yeah.
Thank you, Arthur. So yes, well, I'm not going to say too much about my background. I'm fascinated by that photo. I look like a complete crazy person, so I'm not sure whether that's exactly how I look, but mirror. So contract management, the next big thing, is that really true? We absolutely believe so. Contract management is without question a critical life cycle activity. May not be treated that way within most businesses, but of course there are some understandable reasons for that, and we'll be touching on a few of those in just a moment. Contracts are first and foremost financial instruments. We get into contract for economic purposes. I don't know of any contract where the parties are not motivated by money. So when you get to think about the pressures on business today to reduce costs, to raise revenues, to improve profitability, contracts are absolutely fundamental instruments in achieving it. How well do they do it today? Well, there's a lot of shortfall, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement, and that's why ultimately they're going to be the next big thing. The stuff that's frustrated them up to now is the lack of appropriate levels of automation. This is arguably the last big standout area in businesses that fundamentally lacks any real competent automation. And that, of course, is why we get such high levels of underperformance on so many of the agreements and miss out on so many opportunities. Let's just look at a moment for the issue of automation. We, of course, are well aware that there are quite a number of contract management systems out there in the marketplace today, well over 200 in fact. How could it possibly be that we're looking at a world where automation is at such a low level? Well, quite simply because unfortunately the systems of the past have not been appropriate to the needs of business, and certainly appropriate to the needs of the future. Research that many of you may have followed shown that a high proportion of the systems embedded today fail. They fail in the sense that they either don't get user buy-in, or unfortunately very often those who are leading projects to implement contract management don't actually include quite a number of the key stakeholders, and as a result adoption rates are typically low. One of the other big factors that contributes to the low adoption and the low user rates is the fact that the data flows are often incomplete. They're fragmented, in fact, across multiple systems, making actions and information to user communities of dubious benefit. So the key point is really that the contracting process should be delivering critical data that drives not only the integrity of the business, but also its overall performance. But if we're going to look at truly effective systems, they're actually systems that need to cross organizational boundaries. They need to actually span into suppliers or customers in order to give a holistic view of the parties that are performing on the contract. And contracts in that sense are unique instruments. Other stuff within the enterprise is within the enterprise. Contracts are fundamentally, and their success depends upon the quality of the performance of both parties. So let's just move on to our next slide and reinforce that point a little bit, that contracting process, to repeat, must deliver critical data that ensures integrity and drives performance. But if we're going to maximize the benefits, we have to look across organizational boundaries, often increasingly into supply networks or supply ecosystems, technology that actually links and provides common data that gives a common view of risks and performance so that it can become proactive in problem solving. Good contracting is understood by many and a growing number of executives as being key to the next big thing, which is a new wave of financial performance improvement and, of course, the safeguarding of business reputation. So let's go back to you, Arthur, and let's hear about how Ultria is moving to help people on that particular agenda.
Well, Tim, thank you very much. And certainly, I think your point about the extended value chain for having a contractual domain that crosses individual company borders is certainly going to be a key hotspot area. I think at Ultria, we also see that same kind of synergy across the value domain in the distributor, licensor, partner model on sort of the revenue side of contracts. And then we'll talk a little bit about both of those areas for the balance of the session. So again, thank you very much for sharing your vision. A reminder to the folks who are attending now, please do use the question tab should be on the widget on the right-hand side to fire questions off as we go. So today's agenda, and we'll keep it fairly high level, is why go beyond the edge of the organization. We've been oftentimes challenged with contract lifecycle extending just to the edge to drive increased financial performance. But why go beyond that? And, well, that's our topic for the day. So we've looked at contract lifecycle platforms as being an enabler to provide a streamlined process for exchanging information that's related to contractual documents, which are, as Tim said, effectively the documentation of financial obligation or entitlement between parties. The internal collaboration, the internal review between, let's say, the core contract team and legal or finance or procurement or HR or sales is enabled through a common, easy to use, intuitive for each target audience when we look at the enterprise contract lifecycle space. That in and of itself adds value, but what about extending beyond the edge of the organization and reaching out not just to your vendors and your suppliers on your sort of extended value chain, but reach out forward to your customers, to your partners, to your distributors. Often in today's global, multi-tiered, multi-pronged mode of sales and distribution, there are multiple parties involved that need to execute contractual agreements in order to simply get it done. So allowing the CLM, Contract Lifecycle Platform, to exceed or extend past the edge of the organization is really a tremendous value enabler. Now, just to sort of understand where we all are today, because for some of you, this may be cutting edge. For others of you, this could just be day-to-day occurrence. Let's take a minute or two and fill out the poll on your screen. So first poll question, what are your current and expected borders? And bear with me, I am fighting just a little bit of laryngitis today. A, contract teams collaborating internally. B, exploring stretching the CLM envelope to external parties. C, currently working with select partners, distributors, or vendors. Or D, you're likely 12 months or more away from doing anything. We'll leave this poll open for a few minutes, or actually less than a minute, and have everyone sort of chime in. I think the journey across the maturity levels for many companies, whether you're looking at just putting a repository together to have a shared common place, to have metadata and tagging and basic reports and analytics, or whether you've moved into collaborative authoring, assembly, the reuse of smart clauses into on-demand dynamic contracted vehicles, it's never really too early to start thinking about what that next big leap for your organization is going to be. So I'll ask our moderator, Mark, is our poll open and then closed? Can we see some numbers?
Yes, we can. So, contract teams collaborating internally, 36%.
Okay.
Exploring stretching the CLM envelope to external parties, 20%. Currently working with selected partners, distributors, vendors, 43%. And then likely 12 months or more away is 23%.
Very good. So a large proportion then is that currently working with the extended value chain while collaborating internally. So it sounds like this is a topic that is rather timely. I also expect some really good questions. So let's talk about some of the specific points in the contract lifecycle where the CLM fosters a level of collaboration both within the organization, sort of out to the edge, and then beyond the edge of the organization and with your trading partners. And we'll do this across a fairly standard model of the requesting for a contract, the drafting for a contract, the internal collaboration, review and approval, external negotiation, and that sort of ever-present sign-off to get you to day 0, day 1, ongoing obligation management, which includes entitlement management, and handling things like expiry and renewal, which are rather common internally, but what's the value proposition for extending outside? We'll tap on a couple of use cases just to give some real-world examples of how people are doing it today, and then we'll wrap up with an advert. So fostering collaboration, getting people to work together, is really what a lifecycle management platform is for your contracts. By default, right, its main job, when it's done well and done right, is to foster collaboration between the organizational components within the organization: legal, contracting, sales, marketing, HR, finance, etc. But also to do this with your trading partners, your customers, your distributors, your partners, your vendors. To streamline every stage of the contract lifecycle development, we need to go from the request for an agreement or request for a document, request for a contract, the drafting stage, the review and approval, negotiation and sign-off, obligation management, of course, and expiry renewal management. With that obligation and expiry being a place where really we see the strongest ROI, return on investment in terms of dollars and cents, get driven back to the contract management organization within a company. So the request process is something that we've seen an increased interest in general, which is sending emails to ask for things is not a very effective way to do things. It's not time-stamped, it's not particular. There's a lot of back and forth just between the contract team and the business user to discuss and decide what this really should be. So effectively, what we've seen and what we've deployed on the Ultria CLM is a request portal environment that allows people from within their native tools, within their CRM, Salesforce, within a Microsoft Outlook environment for others, within just the common ServiceNow intranet portal for yet others, to be able to make requests to have contracts or agreements developed, drafted, and released. I like to think of it more as assembled and provided. And we do this through questions and answers as compared to a pull down and fill out a form. Because business users will react better, provide more context if you can guide their thought process and guide their answers. What this generates for the internal side of the organization, of course, is the reuse of the standard templates, the standard clauses using the corporate playbook to drive low error, high accuracy, high content from the initial assembly of the agreement. Even enabling this to happen in a Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Office kind of plug-in environment so that people don't need to leave their comfort zones. Having a request portal listed on the intranet provides this kind of question and answer decision tree scenario that is enabled through pattern recognition for both context and content aware decision making, is further integrated into organizations' CRMs, in this case Salesforce, where questions are entirely context driven, the nature of an opportunity, the kind of the deal, the kind of the product, the kind of the service. Bring information forward so there's no retyping. And then, of course, generating an agreement based on the standard answers to the playbook questions. For those who are not on the sales side but are simply common business users, the ability to use their Microsoft Outlook environment to answer a series of questions and generate a request for a structured document that has been fulfilled. Now, beyond the edge of the organization, to your distributors, to your licensees, to your large partners, large customers, being able to drive the same kind of portal capability becomes incredibly important and creates a sense of collaboration. So unlike the internal portal that we saw before, which brought people through a series of questions, here we've got a more function-focused external portal that not just drives individual partners and customers or licensors or distributors or suppliers to interact with the contract lifecycle platform, but also provides update status, watch lists, and sort of creates a destination for those that are serious about doing business with you. So the external party portal, which is a mouthful, really provides the external party access to the critical functions of the CLM. When it comes to assembling or drafting agreements, internally there are a number of ways to extend to the edge of the organization besides bringing people into the native application. One of them is by having an embedded plugin in Microsoft Word, which is how many agreements are written or drafted or assembled. Likewise, we're working on a Google Docs platform for the exact same thing. And we'll show some examples of this. Being able to collaborate in real time. So many of us are used to instant messaging, right? Whether it's a quick Skype or for those of you who are Lotus Notes shops, or even Salesforce Chatter in terms of threaded discussions. What we've developed and deployed is a collaboration interface that allows this kind of real-time chat, yet picks up on the actual context of what you're working on. And this, too, is extended outside of the organization as needed. The ability to draft and to assemble a document based on standard templates and be able to tag metadata within Microsoft Word, or to open up your clause library and bring in your clauses, including red line of clause if you're appropriate, all within a common framework without ever having to log into the contract lifecycle platform. Right? We're working behind the scenes. We're connected to your Microsoft Word instance to provide all the functionality of the CLM when it comes to drafting and assembling and workflow approvals, while not making the user learn any additional interface. Yet you still have version comparison within the platform for those of the folks who are not using Microsoft Word and maybe editing within the native environment. The collaboration environment provides the ability to invite other people within the organization or external to the organization for real-time discussions about particular context or particular pieces of an agreement. What many of you will find interesting is this information can be stored as part of your audit log. So perhaps internally you don't want all of it stored, but you make those decisions and the system follows those instructions to the letter of the law. Bring in relevant stakeholders, do this in real time, minimize the typical delays that are associated with Microsoft email or any other store and forward email platform, and have everybody do a direct view of what's being spoken about. For contract professionals, being able to view through their collaboration history, as you would with any other chat platform. Now, the review and approval process is the next step, typically, in the contract lifecycle. So someone's made a request for an agreement, the team is assembled from various parts, plus some, I'll say, true artistic legal work, an agreement that now needs to go through final review internally and the approval. For that, within the organization, out to the edge, we have a workflow that provides a very simple environment for very complex environments, right? So that's probably an oxymoron. A very simple tool to configure and provision workflows that can be very complex is probably a better way to state that. This includes parallel as well as serial workflows and the ability to branch out of an existing workflow to bring in subject matter experts or other expertise inside or outside of the organization, let's say outside counsel, or maybe an environmental health and safety expert, or someone with a specialty in government relations. In terms of providing alerts, once you start to extend to the edge of the organization to non-sort of irregular users, the ability to remind and to alert and to engage these people separate from email through direct outreach. So an example here is, and this is also an example on the left side here, the ability to see the question and answer build out of the request capability to generate an agreement, while at the same time sending the notification to an approver or a reviewer to go ahead and click on the link and follow the trail to redline, make changes, make comments to an existing internal document before it goes out. So we've got a fairly large audience today, and I realize as we've been going through this that it'd be good to understand which internal teams many of you associate yourself with. So we'll start up our second poll question. The poll is now open. What department or function do you most identify with? A, if you're on the evil dark side of sales. B, if you're in finance. C, human resources. D, procurement. Or E, if you are a dedicated contract administration or legal team. So again, A, if you're sales. B, if you're finance. C, for human resources. D, for procurement. And E, dedicated contract or a legal admin. What may be interesting is I'm sure that those of you who are on the sales or perhaps sales and finance side are as interested in extending the contract lifecycle out towards the revenue generating side, and of course procurement on the supply chain side. But we've had an unusual amount of interest in human resources, especially now that the holiday seasons are upon us here in the United States, for folks looking at contingent and temporary labor. Folks coming in through an employment portal, being able to self-certify that they are free and untethered to work, that they have whatever effective driver license or insurability, and oftentimes they are signing confidentiality and ethics agreements. Some organizations, that's part of their HRMS. Others, they're using CLM to enable this because it can be executed and captured. Let's see what our poll results look like.
Okay. So yes, on this call, it doesn't appear we have any human resources people. 11% are sales, 6% are finance, 22% for procurement, and 61% are dedicated contract admins or legal function.
Dynamite. So I will appreciate the feedback from the poll. It'll keep me from talking about human resources examples. Thanks very much. So I think certainly then, if I look at the vast proportion, those folks who are on the procurement side, but also those folks who associate themselves more with contract admin and legal side, getting it to the point of negotiation and sign off is the goal for that first half of the contract process. For those of you who know the Ultria model, we firmly believe that obligation and expiry management is a place where we start to see significant value from the CLM investment. But if you look at negotiation and sign-off, this is almost exclusively the area of the external party, right? So internal, you've done your review, you've done your approval, it's been sent out. Now, how does the external party engage with you, or how can you increase the collaboration? How can you foster collaboration with your external parties through the external sign-off process? So a couple of places where we see this is the extension of the workflow to provide an easy negotiation in Delta and amendment issuing environment for both the T's and C's, your delivery components, SLAs, and more. Native support, of course, for e-signatures, whether it's DocuSign or eSign Live or EchoSign, as the case may be. And how do you provide a red line environment for folks who may not necessarily be serious Microsoft Word users? And we've had requests, and of course we've implemented this for others, that they're looking to provide this kind of a red line collaborative environment via the portal. So this is the external contract, the EPP, the external party portal, and allowing for real-time negotiation, and also, as you see on the right, real-time collaboration. A lot of this stemmed from, I'll say, large organization collaborations, this cross-border kind of work, where you are trying to get the deal done, and we're not looking at two hostile parties so much as two folks looking at a win-win in a collaborative way. I'm sure many of us on today's call have had much more success doing live negotiation with someone running the document through WebEx and cutting days, if not weeks, out of the negotiation cycle. And I don't mean to pick on WebEx. It could be WebEx, GoToMeeting, Skype, etc. Why use the third party when instead you can do this collaboratively in real time with the ability to see each other's changes? So as long as both parties agree, this is, I think, a fantastic enabler. And notice that on the left-hand side, you've got the standard structures of the agreement, and that allows that straight-through walkthrough. Now, for those of us or those of you who have standard agreements, this is a great way to allow your distributors or your licensees or your resellers to leverage the playbook that you've got for your core capability licenses or agreements, and provide sort of limited access or limited change while still letting their end customers partake in the extended collaboration. So once we have a signed agreement, the document's been either wet signed and scanned, or it's been e-signed. Obligation management is the spot where we really see a very solid value for extending capability beyond the edge of the enterprise. So certainly within the organization, sort of up to the edge, giving your business users the ability to track and manage performance, milestones, service level agreements, and obligations in a way that is easy and simple for them is key. It's a great opportunity to optimize your revenue by leveraging entitlements for your direct as well as indirect channel from a sales perspective. Also from a procurement perspective, this is a great way to ensure that vendor SLAs are met, and that any penalty payments or rebates, etc., are practically applied. That is a lot of work for the contract team or the administrative team for those contracts. And you really do, I think, want to empower your business users, both on the sales side and the buy side, to get their arms around that. A good CLM, the Ultria CLM, of course, provides this capability through its post-award contracts and post-award analytics model. To provide this sort of a full interface where your system of record, the contract, and the performance metrics as captured in that are compared against your operational platforms. This additionally gives you, the internal organization, the ability to risk profile. So we look at risk across many dimensions. It could be something like contract risk based on the text itself. You're on your 4th level alternate clause. You've modified these 3 key clauses. Combine that with performance across a category across all contracted parties, or combine that with financial liability, credit risk, or diversity risk, whatever the case may be. and bring that information together into a common risk model, or likewise, export this information into your risk management tool if you've got something broader across your organization. Moving beyond the edge and getting into your outside parties, whether they be customers or suppliers. Providing insight to your trading partners for their obligations. Or recently we had someone who wanted to provide visibility to a customer for the obligations of theirs, to show how good of a job they were doing. It's a great way to foster this kind of visibility. The trading partner, if they're a supplier and they're starting to fall off on their service level agreements or their quality numbers or their timeliness schedule, whatever the obligation is, gets plenty of warning. And I think everyone would rather have a trading partner improve their performance than invoke a penalty clause. They may not have any other way to see this information. I was talking with someone yesterday, and one of the obligations that they put into their system was a reminder to have an account review every 3 months, and that account review had to be driven by a particular individual, and that individual needed input from 5 specific business teams, and that those 5 business teams were now assigned a task to track. So from an obligation management perspective, there was a contractual obligation from their customer to them as the supplier to meet quarterly. This became a very straightforward tracking mechanism with alerts and reminders that would trigger individuals within these teams to supply the information in time for an on-site account review. So this runs just as cleanly with your large accounts, your large customers, your large partners, as it does with those trusted suppliers and parts of your extended value chain. It is something I think that many of us overlook. So dashboards themselves, of course, can be very powerful tools, whether that's inside or outside viewing. And the ability to drill down and go into the data provides this visibility on trending. So if a common question that we see from an obligation or penalty clause is a well-written penalty clause says, listen, if you're off for a month, I'm going to hold this and we're going to watch. But if you exceed performance in the next 3 months or the next 3 quarters, whatever the case may be, we're not going to ding you for the penalty amount. This just, again, gives people insight, the ability to run those weighted averages and do that through your contract platform, because it is, after all, the source of truth for that financial obligation or financial entitlement. Excuse me. Here is an opportunity just to view the default risk profile platform. So this is both risk for contract text, for individual party performance, or even risk across a particular category. If you are sourcing, let's say, direct materials, or you're selling into a particular region, are you seeing a higher level of defaults in the Northeast during the blizzard season, or are you seeing a higher number of insurance claims in the Southeast during hurricane season? Things that you might expect, but it's good to have that kind of data presented and pulled out. Now, to the external party, being able to bring subsets of this information related to risk, performance, met and unmet obligations, potential entitlements in terms of revenue recapture and the like, is again, through usually a partner branded portal, provide this access both to the metadata and to that operational data that you wish them to see. This is, of course, in addition to the contract history, the version history that we saw earlier. Expiry renewal management is a hot topic for many. And I'd like to think that many of us on the call today have successfully mastered this. But we do find that a relatively high percentage of folks are not quite sure when their contracts expire, at least in terms of certain categories of goods or services they may acquire. And given the typical high turnover for most sales organizations, if you're writing agreements that are multi-year, there may be challenges with identifying which contracts are coming up for renewal. One of the challenges that we see is that you don't always want to renew a customer at the same terms that you might have signed them off for 3 years ago. Likewise, what looked to be a really good deal with the supplier 3 years ago may not be so good now because there's new supplier entrants, or the cost of direct materials has changed, or fuel hedging strategies are modified. it's just really good practice to go back and revisit these. So as we look at managing these things, it's a lever of not just reminding somebody or alerting that a contract is due for action, but doing that within the context of what other contracts have been written with that particular supplier or that customer. Remove the ambiguity so that someone, some party, some team, some individual is responsible for tracking, and to increase the frequency at which reminders are sent as you get closer to a decision date on that particular award or contract. As you submit these reminders, to simultaneously link in any and all auxiliary documents so that what might have once been left in that electronic filing cabinet and sort of waiting for the other party to say, okay, I've signed my copy, we're ready for another 3-year term, your teams are armed and they're informed. And I think we all know that the more informed we are before entering into a last-minute renegotiation, the better off we all are. So how does this extend beyond the edge of the organization? All right, likewise, these external teams, your account teams that are working with your large customers, the large customers themselves, they can be alerted through the external party portal. These alerts can go right to their desks. They can go right to their sort of default homepage / dashboard view. All of the watch list warnings and alerts that you see internally to the edge are now available beyond the edge. Allowing them to do this also makes sure that you have a very collaborative and very open environment, and I think yields a much better business relationship. Of all things, actually, thinking back to Tim's opening comments, business reputation among trading partners, which is golden, it should always remain golden. If you treat people well as you go through your contract renewal or expiry or renegotiation phase, right? These are things that people remember. And being transparent and giving folks plenty of notice that something's about to go away or something is about to automatically restart is, besides just being good business practice, is an honorable thing to do. And I think it reinforces that positive reputation. Doing that with numbers, black and white, show pictures with click-throughs so that I can go through and bring these agreements up. I know where they stand. I have that capability. As an external party, it's a tremendous enabler. And of course, you, as the owner of the platform, you are embracing and bringing people into your environment, which is good for you from a control and from a knowledge perspective. So our last and final poll for the day: which CLM capability would benefit your organization the most? And luckily, there's nothing here about HRMS. A, post-award analytics. All right, so after day one, contracts are signed, agreement is in process. This gets into the performance aspect. So obligation, expiry. B, an external party portal. For those of you who are working with your suppliers or those contract teams who've identified outside parties, maybe even your outside counsel, would the external party portal bring value? C, workflow. Simple automation of the process, getting out of email forwards and keeping it within the system, both to the edge of the organization and then beyond the edge of the organization into your trading partner space. Separately, expiry renewal management. Is that a challenge that you guys may be facing? That's D. And then E, all of the above. So A, post-award analytics, obligation, entitlement. B, external party portal, sharing your CLM with your trading parties. C, workflow, both internal and external, to manage contract flow. Or D, managing expiry renewal management. And of course, the ever-present E, all of the above.
Okay, people are still voting.
Perfect.
All right.
Maybe I shouldn't have given people a choice for E. Maybe that's the easy catch-all. So what are our numbers? Oh, the poll's still open. Okay.
Yep, I just closed it and shared. So Only 2% said external party portal.
Okay.
15% post-award analytics.
Perfect.
17% workflow. 12% expiry renewal management. 54% all the above.
So more than half of us just sort of took the easy way out, I guess. Perfect. So I'm assuming all of the above does touch the external party portal to some degree. Good. I think we'll see how our questions at the end work out. So keeping an eye on the time, we'll just spend a couple of minutes on 2 case studies. So I like this one. Use case, Lifecycle of a typical sales contract. And for the percentage of folks that are on our session today that are in sales, I'm sure that there is some snickering going on right now. There's no such thing as a typical sales contract. But let's look at the workflow. Salesperson, sales exec, customer relationship manager creates or initiates a sales contract in their CRM, customer relationship management platform, right? Salesforce, etc. Select the template, internal or external, fill in the details. System itself generates the agreement and moves this agreement template based off your standard templates. It has incorporated clauses based on the answers in the second step. Now moves the contract effectively to other stakeholders in the internal approval process. So sales operations to approve overall deal structure, finance to make sure the margins are correct, legal to make sure all the T's and C's are intact and nobody mucked anything about. After the internal stakeholders review the contract, suggest changes, internal red lines, comments, all of course done within the CLM. Or, as we saw before, Microsoft Word, the native tool. Post-negotiation with the external party, the contract is finalized, signed, of course, e-signed or otherwise, and stored in the repository. Now, it's in the repository. How do we ensure that the obligations are being met? Operational performance numbers are being hit, service level numbers are being hit. This is where a multidisciplinary team, sales operations, finance, and perhaps actual operations, or this would be different maybe if it was procurement, ensure the obligations are met by using the CLM alerts, reminders, and reporting. Typically on a monthly basis, a feed from your operational platform would be loaded into the framework and the reporting would get generated. For those of you who have larger or more complex requirements, we can also take a direct feed from your operational platform, feed this risk information and obligation information back to individual shareholders and stakeholders, and we can also feed up into our risk model for an enterprise level risk profile. Now, although we only saw, I think it was 6 or 7% of us were interested in the external party portal, 54% said all of the above. So I'll put a couple of points in that direction, maybe figuring 10%. A multinational brand, let's say a manufacturer, licensor of consumer sporting goods and sporting apparel, it could utilize an EPP, an external party portal, in a couple of ways. All right. First, perhaps these retail partners, distributors, can raise requests for agreements via the external party portal and can invoke appropriate templates. This is a good model, I think, if these remote or somewhat connected folks may be individual sales agents. I wouldn't go so far as, let's say, an insurance or a real estate model, but perhaps franchise or country-level distributors would be able to avail themselves of standard template information. And rather than your teams, since most of you are on the contract administration, contract management side, rather than you sending out templates once a quarter or once a year by email and having these people pretty much ignore them and go with the last set of red lines that they used, by running this through the external portal, we get all of the benefits of having an internal CLM extended to the outside for version control and ensuring that the standard templates are pushed. By enabling negotiation and redline on the EPP, You can also enable mobile device access so that folks who are at the edge of your relationship between you and your end customer, so these are your distributors, your licensors, your franchisees, are redlining your agreement in front of a client and basically doing site level or site specific contract updates. Model would also work for those of you who might be in the real estate, timeshare, lease, or even vehicle business. So the EPP extends past the edge of your organization and is, I think, a very much more viable solution for mobile updates of standard forms than a, let's say, a Microsoft Word plugin. So the EPP facilitates this negotiation with your trading partners, manufacturers, those folks who are geographically disparate, and where your framework or your platform may not be a laptop and something more fun and engaging. The external party can also then use this interface to track their payments, whether it's vendor or sales, right? Contract expirations, and also track their obligations and overall contract performance. Again, from a visibility perspective, having this kind of high visibility, high collaboration environment, I think just generates a huge amount of goodwill between you and your trading partners. And as Tim, I think, summarized, we've all known the world is flat. We've all heard the cliches around a global environment. But I think the real reality is that we've hit a level of maturity in our use and adoption of contracts to create extended relationships and sort of mini ecosystems among trading partners that providing this kind of flexible, collaborative, and highly visible approach is that enabler for A, good business, B, better financial performance, and C, maybe the non-direct monetization of goodwill and relationship and reputation. With that, just a little bit of an advert as we sort of queue up our questions. So please keep running on the questions tab. I'll figure out how to open that up in a second. Ultria, as a contract lifecycle provider, has a full view of the full lifecycle. So we start at the request, whether it's internal, non-legal, internal, business, people at the edge of the organization making requests, or as we've shown today, even folks outside of the organization. The drafting, the assembly, the reporting, the workflow, the approval, the collaboration, and then just as importantly, after signing, measuring the performance, tracking the performance, obligations, and overall relationship of the contract until its expiry, renewal, or untimely demise. So let's just take a question or two now, and bear with me while I flip into the chat window.
I don't think you can actually see the questions there, Arthur.
You know what, Mark? You're absolutely right. Luckily, I've gotten, I have an associate who's kind enough to send me 2 of them from the chat session. So I'm going to take a quick sip of a tea. Again, sorry for the laryngitis.
Yes, there's some interesting questions, Arthur. I can see them. I think I'm able to. And I have managed to take myself off mute, which is always helpful. So one of the questions, well, it's pitched in the context of asking whether you've actually got any customers in the engineering and construction sector. But more specifically, it's actually talking about the challenge of managing international business. How do you solve the standardization of the contract lifecycle management system for the different jurisdictions where the enterprise has its businesses, different contracting laws, regulations in each market? And as a supplement to that, also Enrique asks, how many different languages does Ultria work in parallel with?
Okay, easy enough. I was expecting the last part of it first when I heard international. Contract data and user interface both. Right now available in 19 languages. And offline I can certainly share the list, but pretty much all the majors. So from a language perspective, fully supported. Now, what gets interesting, and this is also true of both the internal and the external party portal, and I guess because the question came from engineering, engineering has a couple of different functions, right? So at the risk of boring everyone else, You can look at design, you can look at build, you can look at run as the three major functions of most engineering companies that are large and global. So you'll find different language requirements at each, but at the design level, you'll have not as much, I'll say, a localization requirement when it comes to regulatory concerns. Certainly when you look at the build side and the run side is when we see those. Having multi-part contracts, and of course multilingual contracts is straightforward. Being able to support clause libraries that are context aware. In other words, which trading party in which location is on the other side of the table lets our software insert the appropriate clause for that particular function. So even if it's something as, let's get into maybe line item level or milestone level detail, environmental regulatory control or data protection privacy acts, to have all of these triggered based on where the work is being done and who the other party is a straightforward effort. So the short answer is, fully supported. Yes, we have it. In terms of international large multi-party, yes, we do. I think we have one that is running, I didn't even realize there are 53 countries and 37,000 employees. I guess we can move on to another question.
Yeah, so, well, one of the others that always interests a lot of people, of course, is around the typical complexity of implementation. I know this is going to be a bit of a rule of thumb, Arthur, but what should people expect in terms of how long it will take to actually implement an Ultria system?
No, Tim, that's a great question. There are probably two, maybe three. There are three processes that work in parallel when we implement. One is easy for us to size and to scale, which is the provisioning and configuration of the platform. We have a sort of a proven methodology that takes people through the business requirements definition stages. We've got this written down and shareable. As a matter of fact, I think it's one of our differentiators. It's not uncommon to see between 2.5 to 3 months for the provisioning for large, multilingual, global. And that sounds like it's actually pretty quick because the slower process is the loading up of legacy contracts. So if the existing repository is not electronic, there's an awful lot of heavy lifting that may go into moving 10, 20, 30, 40,000 agreements. The third, of course, is adoption, which is rollout and change management. I mean, that being said, if you've got less than 10,000 agreements and you're running in let's say 2 or 3 countries for a majority, and you've got the ability to get folks on board, we've rolled out in under 2 months. Longest rollout, I think, is probably close to, let's say 7 to 8 months. So hopefully, I realize you were looking for an answer. But I'm going to defer to it depends, but to sort of level set at 2.5 months to 7 or 8 months is not an unrealistic expectation for an enterprise level rollout.
Yeah, no, I think that's very reasonable. Obviously, there are quite a variety of ranges of complexity in that answer. Jorge asked the question, you mentioned locating hidden liabilities. Can you give an example of how your system does this?
Just to make sure I understood the question, is how can the system identify hidden liabilities?
Yes.
Perfect. So hidden liabilities, if identifying something that's hidden is an interesting way to phrase a question. A hat tip to the person who asked. The best way to identify hidden liabilities, so this is going to be coming from third-party paper, not your own paper, obviously. If it's your own paper, your own clauses, you know where your liabilities are. So this is coming in from third-party parsing. We have the capability, even from a PDF or an image, to take it, convert it to OCR. That OCR text is now parsed and read. We automatically break it into contract sections and break it down to the contract clause level based on existing keywords. And we do this across multiple languages. that information, once it's chunked, can then be further parsed for sort of those red flag words. And if they're found in sections where they are not anticipated, the way the search algorithm works in today's version of the Ultria tool is it represents the word that you're looking for and gives you 10 to 20 words before and 20 words after so that you have it in context. Each clause can then be tagged, and then you can target an individual within your organization for an in-depth review of that clause. So the simple answer, it's identified through text search. The text result is intelligent because it knows that if I'm looking for indemnification, pick a common term, every one of my contracts is going to come with indemnification, but I'm looking to see the context. Once I have the context, I can then tag it for forwarding for an in-depth review. So a combination of AI parsing, AI, and then manual QA.
So a bit of sort of natural language processing in there, Arthur.
We do. In fact, I didn't mean to turn today's session into sort of an advert, but our native language processing as well as machine-based learning is used for that clause extraction and clause definition.
And I think that really is such a critical point. I would just like to say to listeners, I think one of the most exciting things, of course, about the emerging technologies, which Ultria is absolutely one, is the way that they are now embedding these new technologies of artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. And that is what is critical for you to watch out for. It's giving dramatically better performance than the past, but it's also, of course, future-proofing you. Concerning the risk dashboard, which are the metrics in CLM to measure and define a contract risky? Hey, I'd love to answer that with an example. I recently saw Arthur and see whether you're going to give the same answer. So,
Tim, please do. Give me a second to wet my whistle.
One of the things that we're seeing with these more intelligent systems is, for example, the ability for you to build an understanding within your system of what is the span of normal. In other words, what is your range of acceptable risk? And for the machine to then do basic review and analytics to say, okay, I've received third-party paper, here are the clauses within it, here are the ones that fit within your accepted norms, and here are the ones that don't. Is that what you're going to say, Arthur?
Very much. And I love the idea of setting the norms. To me, those norms are set once you've got sufficient data within the system to now know what has been acceptable. And I think the norm sort of feeds into your predictive risk.
Yep.
So understanding what clauses are risky, which ones are close to, within, or bordering on your comfort areas, versus combining that with the obligation or side or the performance side gives you a more holistic risk model.
It's exciting stuff, isn't it? The nature of the insights you can now get, the stuff where in the past you were just sort of guessing or expressing opinion, and today you can begin to get some facts. So I'm conscious that we've come to the end. There were one or two questions asked that related to pricing. I'm not going to pose those at you because I don't think it's maybe appropriate in this environment. For those who obviously would like to know more about the pricing and charging models, I'm sure Arthur would absolutely love to hear from you, and of course you've got his contact information here on the screen. So with that, I'd like to thank the audience for some great questions, and thank you very much, Arthur, for I think a great exposition and something that really I hope will inspire many to appreciate just how revolutionary a lot of the technology, particularly Ultria technology, can now really be in streamlining contract lifecycle management.
Well, Tim, thank you very much for all of your assistance and help today, and for starting off with such tremendous insight. Appreciate that.
So thank you, everybody. And as we said before, you'll be getting a copy of a link, or rather a link to this recording and to the material that Arthur has taken us through. So thank you.